Good afternoon. Welcome to today's 2015 Sol Kanee Lecture on Peace and Justice, an initiative sponsored by the Richardson Foundation that features distinguished speakers in peace and justice studies. Welcome to members of the university community, welcome to students, welcome to staff, welcome to supporters of the Mauro Center, to members of the board of directors, and to all who contribute their time and energies to make events such as the Sol Kanee Lecture a possibility. Welcome to members of the community, welcome to the community of Fort Richmond, welcome to the community of Winnipeg, the community of Manitoba, and anyone who's from beyond the Manitoba boundaries. Many of you have traveled very far. Many of you might have struggled to find parking. You may have rearranged your schedules and otherwise accommodated to be here today, so we very much welcome you. Welcome to each of you in particular, because your very presence attests to the increasing interest in building of global and local communities founded much more fully on peace principles and the realization of justice. We're very fortunate to have with us today Father Gregory Boyle, who's the founder of Homeboy Industries, who's managed to make the long trek from his home in Los Angeles to be with us here today in Winnipeg. My name is Michelle Gallant, and it's my privilege to act as Master of Ceremonies today. As to the format, we will begin today's by hearing a few words from Dr. Chris Adams, who's the rector of St. Paul's College, and he's also the chair of the board of directors of the Arthur Mauro Center. After that, we will turn to hear from Dr. Jay During, who's the vice provost and the dean of the Faculty of Graduate Studies. Then we will hear from Father Eduardo Parosotto, who will introduce his fellow Jesuit, Father Boyle, and Father Soto is also a candidate in the Peace and Justice Studies program here at the University of Manitoba. Finally, we will hear from Father Boyle himself, and after he's made his remarks, he's kindly agreed to entertain questions for a few minutes. So we'd ask that you hold your questions until he has finished his speaking. And we will conclude with some final remarks from another PhD student, Mrs. Danielle Felicia, who is also in the Peace and Justice program here at the University of Manitoba. And please, if you haven't picked one up, there are brochures that detail today's lecture. And once again, welcome. And with that, I turn to Dr. Chris Adams.
I hope you aren't confusing this room with the blood donor clinic next door. If you have blood to donate, that's next door. Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Adams, and as rector of St. Paul's College and the chair of the board of directors of the Arthur V. Mauro Center for Peace and Justice, I want to welcome all of you to the 12th annual Sol Kanee Lecture on Peace and Justice, featuring Father Gregory Boyle, the founder and executive director of Homeboy Industries in Los Angeles. At this point in this event, I wish to note that St. Paul's College and the University of Manitoba's campuses are located on original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories, we acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves as a community to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. The Sol Kanee Lecture Series on International Peace Building is supported by the generosity received from the Richardson and Sons family of Winnipeg. We are grateful for their contribution. As well, we extend our thanks to the leadership of members of the Winnipeg community, such as Mr. Sol Kanee, who was an ardent champion of peace building and human rights, and for whom this lecture is named after. Let us also take a moment to acknowledge the center's benefactor, Dr. Arthur V. Mauro, who is here with his wife, Naomi Levine. Arthur Mauro, along with the many others who have contributed to the work of the center and of the students enrolled in Peace and Conflict Studies program. Without their support, we would not be here for this type of a lecture. Together, through all of our efforts, we have opened the door for greater opportunities to know, understand, and walk the path of peace. I want to now welcome Dr. Jay During, the University of Manitoba Vice Provost of Graduate Education, who will bring greetings from the University of Manitoba. Dr. During.
Thank you, Chris. It is a pleasure indeed for me to bring greetings on behalf of the President's Office. I'd like to pick up on some of Dr. Adams' comments and kind of roll things back a little bit. I'd like to start by recognizing a few of the significant events that effectively have us all here today. And to do that, we go back to 2001, when Dr. Arthur Mauro made a significant donation to St. Paul's College to create the Mauro Center for Peace and Justice. From there, we gave rise to the PhD program in Peace and Conflict Studies that was started by Dr. Sean Byrne and Dr. Jessica Senehi. That program's gone on to pick up additional faculty members, Dr. Maureen Flaherty and Dr. Hamdessa Tuso, and is now the academic home to more than 75 graduate students, a not insignificant program. Last but not least, as Dr. Adams has indicated, is Sol Kanee himself for his leadership and his vision. It only goes to show that if you sort of wrap all these things up, great things happen when we all pull and work together. But I believe that the best is probably yet to come. Winnipeg is now home to the Museum for Human Rights. The University of Manitoba is embarking on a Master's in Human Rights graduate program. And the University of Manitoba is home to the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. We're on the precipice of something probably much more significant than we're currently looking at. I would suggest that a global social justice spotlight is very succinctly focusing in on Winnipeg and the University of Manitoba. Which takes me to today's Sol Kanee lecturer, Father Greg. I'm going to avoid the Father Boyle thing because that just gets you in trouble. One of the characteristics of Homeboy Industries is its website and the quote of the day on the website. And earlier today, someone asked Father Greg for a quote. And I was going to slip him the one that I'd written down that I took off the website when I went through weeks and weeks of quotes that are still up on their website. The one that I liked was, "The measure of our compassion lies not in our service to others, but in our willingness to see ourselves connected to them." The measure of our compassion lies not in our service to others, but in our willingness to see ourselves connected to them. Think about it. Father Greg, welcome to the University of Manitoba. Congratulations on being this year's Sol Kanee lecturer. We're so pleased you're here.
The first time that I heard about Father Greg was here in Winnipeg. Even though I became a Jesuit 17 years ago, I never heard about him until talking to an ex-offender and gang-related friend who told me about him coming to Canada. He talked with excitement that I quickly brought his book, Tattoos on the Heart, to read about this man that sparked so much enthusiasm in my fellow friend, who now sadly is again incarcerated for home invasion. I have to confess that I have some prevention against Jesuits in the United States. Well, not only in the United States. I was caught in the black and white mindset, or prestigious academics supporting or well-established universities and education centers, or troublemakers sent to the global south, former third world, unsuitable neither here nor there. All of them were bearing the benefit of the doubt of their good intentions. That is also a Jesuit rule. My mindset was completely teared down when I read his book. I discovered in the pages of Tattoos on the Heart a man able to open up possibilities and get rid of conflict and violence through his fierce appropriation of the reality that surrounds him. His experience brought myself from a space of opposites and frustration to a space of hope. According to his website, Father Greg was born in Los Angeles, one of 8 children. After attending and graduating from St. Brennan School and Loyola High School, he entered the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, and was ordained priest in 1984. He received his BA in English from Gonzaga University, an MA in English from Loyola Marymount University, and Master of Divinity from the Western School of Theology, and a Sacred Theology Master's degree from the Jesuits School of Theology. Father Greg taught at Loyola High School and worked with Christian-based communities in Cochabamba, Bolivia. Instead of going to Santa Clara University to teach, he was appointed in 1986 as a pastor of Dolores Mission in the Boyle High neighborhood of Los Angeles. This neighborhood, if you look at the website of the LA police, have 800,000 population and 5.62 square miles, among the highest densities of the city of Los Angeles, face the activity of 24 violent gangs, even though he said that in the parish were only 8. At the parish, Father Greg and many community members developed positive alternatives to address the escalating problems and unmet needs of gang-involved youth. These efforts included establishing of an elementary school, a daycare program, and finding legitimate employment for young people. In 1992, as a response to the civil unrest in Los Angeles, Father Greg launched the first social enterprise business, Homeboy Bakery. The mission of Homeboy's model of social enterprises to create an environment that provides training, work experience, and above all, the opportunity for rival gangs members to work side by side. The success of the bakery created the groundwork for additional social enterprise businesses. Today, Homeboy Industries, nonprofit economic development enterprises include Homeboy Bakery, Homeboy Silk Screen and Embroidery, Homeboy Homegirl Merchandise, Homegirl Cafe and Catering, Homeboy Farmers Market, and Homeboy Dinner at Los Angeles City Hall. As an executive director of Homeboy Industries and an acknowledgement as expert on gangs and intervention approaches, Father Boyle is an internationally renowned speaker. He has given commencement addresses at numerous universities, as well as spoken at conferences for teachers, social workers, criminal justice workers, and others about the importance of adult attention, guidance, and unconditional love in preventing youth from joining gangs. Father Greg and several homies were featured speakers at many places, such as the White House Conference on Youth in 2005, and in 2009, he was a member of the 10-person California delegation to President Clinton's Summit on Children in Philadelphia. Father Greg is also a consultant to youth service and governmental agencies, policymakers, and employers. This is the activity that brought Father G to Winnipeg 2 years ago. I had the opportunity not only to go to the conference where he spoke, but also to share some free time as a fellow Jesuit and see the profound commitment to boundless compassion rooted in his upbringing. The love, tears, and hope that the book gave to me, and for sure to many other of its readers, were real in his person. Also, I could see with my own eyes that hope has an address in 130 Bruno Street in Los Angeles, California. I have the privilege of visiting this awesome place and being guided by one of the homies, Gabriel, who explained to me the different programs they have, the tattoo removal, the employment services, the case management, the legal and educational services, mental health services, and work training programs. The list of awards of this man is impressive, and you can look at in their website. A lot. California Peace Prize granted by California Wellness Foundation, Life Achievement Award, Bon Appetit Award. Well, he has a Bon Appetit too, yes. So. And Father Greg also won the New York Times bestselling book, Tattoos on the Heart, The Power of Boundless Compassion, received in 2010. The Southern California Indie Booksellers Association as Non-Fiction Book Award, and was named as one of the best books in 2010 by Publisher Weekly. The best debut author also was awarded and also winner of the 2011 Penn Center USA Literary Award for Creative Nonfiction. Homeboy's Industries, now located in the heart of downtown Los Angeles, is recognized as the largest gang intervention and reentry program in the world and has become an international model. Today, I am very happy, as you notice, to introduce to all of you this great man that is making a difference in the world in deeds and words. Please give a round of applause to the guest speaker of the 12th Annual Sol Kanee Lecture on Peace and Justice, mi carnal, Father Gregory Boyle.
Thank you. I'm always sort of a basket case after this because a couple of those kids are gone. So it just sort of gets to me. Maybe it's a little homesick too. Anyway, it's a real privilege to be with all of you, and what an honor it's been here. People in Winnipeg are so good. I feel a little bit concerned because I spoke, we had conversation, a very stimulating conversation with students in the Peace and Conflict Studies program, and that was so stimulating. And then yesterday morning, I had an opportunity to speak with a lot of folks in kind of community members. And then, as Eduardo mentioned, 2 years ago, I spoke at the Viscount Hotel to a whole bunch of people. So I apologize if you've heard some of my stuff before. It happens. Once I was invited to speak at a foster grandparent gathering, a huge gathering in Southern California. Well, I had spoken at it the summer before, same people. I don't know why they invited me 2 summers in a row, but there you have it. And afterwards, this grandmother came up to me, and a foster grandmother, and I think she liked the talk. She had big tears in her eyes, and she grabbed both my hands, and she said, "I heard you last year. It never gets better." So, kind of hoping she misspoke there, but anyway, it's the privilege of my life for 30 years to have worked with gang members, and the day will never come when I have more courage, or I am more noble, or I'm closer to God than these folks. People like Luis Perez, who was texting me this morning, he kind of helps run the place. Been a heroin addict, gang member, shot caller, prisoner, tattooed. And now he kind of runs the place, one of the several. And he's become something of a public speaker in his own right. So we went out to dinner not long ago, and he was giving me tips on how to speak publicly. And he said, you have to pepper your talk with self-defecating humor. I said, yeah, no shit. So brace yourselves. What brings you here in the afternoon when you could be doing other things? It's a kind of a vision of wanting the world to look differently than it currently looks. All of us have a vision that undergirds what we do every day. The prophet Habakkuk writes, the vision still has its time, presses on to fulfillment, and it will not disappoint. And if it delays, wait for it. But none of us want to wait around con los brazos cruzados, tapping our feet, staring at our watches. We all want to make something happen. We want to roll up our sleeves. We want to create something different. What Martin Luther King says about church could well be said about the Sol Kanee lecture. This is not the place you've come to. It has always been the place you will go from. And you'll go from here to do something different, and something that reflects the kind of vision you have for how you hope the world might look. what I want to suggest in the brief time I have with you, that what I think we're called to create is in fact a community of kinship, such that God in fact might recognize it. Mother Teresa, I think, diagnosed the world's ills correctly when she suggested that the problem in the world is that we've just forgotten that we belong to each other. How do we stand against forgetting that? How do we imagine a circle of compassion and then imagine nobody standing outside of it? How do we dismantle the barriers that exclude? How do we inch our way out to the margins? This is a word that Pope Francis uses a lot. It gets translated sometimes as edges, the periphery. How do we stand at the margins? Because the truth about the margins is if you stand there, you look under your feet, the margins are getting erased precisely because you chose to stand there. And you stand with the specificity. You stand with the poor and the powerless and the voiceless. And you find a way to do that. You stand with those whose dignity has been denied. You stand with those whose burdens are more than they can bear. And every once in a while, you just have this amazing privileged moment where you get to stand with the easily despised and the readily left out, with the demonized, so that the demonizing will stop, and with the disposable, so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. I suspect that if kinship happened to be our goal, we would no longer be promoting justice. We'd be celebrating it. Peace and justice really is a byproduct of our kinship. Because peace and justice won't happen if you singularly focus on it. I think it can only happen if you work for kinship and connection. If you stand against forgetting that we belong to each other, peace and justice will be a byproduct of that effort. No kinship, no peace. No kinship, no justice. I think that's just how it works. So the homies have taught me everything of value, and I couldn't be more grateful to them. But in the last couple of years, they've taught me how to text, and I'm so grateful to them. I find that it sure beats the heck out of actually talking to people. And I'm pretty good at it, you know, kind of dexterous, you know, LOL and OMG and BTW. And the homies have taught me a new one, OHN, which apparently stands for, oh, hell no. And I'm using that one quite a bit lately. I suspect I'm not alone in being vexed by autocorrect, you know, iPhone autocorrect, you know, and I had a homegirl just recently on a Sunday. Her name is Bertha, and she texted me, "Where are you at?" And I said, "I'm about to speak to a room full of monjas," which are nuns, sisters, about to speak to a room full of monjas. I hit send, and autocorrect sent her this message, that I was about to speak to a room full of ninjas. And she thought that was pretty interesting. My worst one was a homie who texted me, I've got 5 of those today, that said, "Hey, you know, they cut off my phone or my light bill or whatever." And I just didn't have money. So I wrote, "Things are tight." When I pushed send, autocorrect told him, "Thongs are tight." And he wrote me back, "Sorry to hear that. What about my rent?" You know. So anyway, there I am in a car with 2 older vatos, homies, Manuel and Poncho, and they do a variety of things at Homeboy, and they're going to help me give a talk at a high school, and Manuel's in the front seat. So we're driving about 15 minutes, and Manuel gets an incoming text that he reads to himself, and he kind of chuckles. And I said, "What is it?" He goes, "Oh, it's dumb. It's from Snoopy back at the office." And, well, Snoopy, I'd just seen him, and I gave him I have water. Yeah, thank you. People all were very concerned about me. Thank you, and I appreciate it. And I had just seen Snoopy, and I had just given him a big abrazote. And Snoopy and Manuel work together in the clock-in room where they clock in hundreds and hundreds of our workers. And it's a tough job because gang members can occasionally be attitudinal. And so I said, well, what's he say? And he goes, oh, it's dumb. Hang on. Hey, dog, it's me, Snoops. Yeah, they got my ass locked up at county jail. They're charging me with being the ugliest vato in America. You have to come down right now, show them they got the wrong guy. Well, we died laughing. I almost drove into oncoming traffic. And then I realized that Manuel and Snoopy are enemies. They're from rival gangs. They used to shoot bullets at each other. Now they shoot text messages. And there's a word for that, and the word is kinship. How do we obliterate once and for all the illusion that we are separate, that there is an us and a them? Everybody in this room is engaged in some kind of service, from soup kitchens to working with gang members or working on a side of town that underserved. Everybody in this room is engaged in some kind of service. But service is where you begin. You never want to end there. Service is the hallway that gets you to the ballroom, and the ballroom is the place of kinship and connection. That's where you want to end up. Because truth be told, in service, there's a distance even. You know, sometimes I'm the service provider, you're the service recipient. You want to merge even that. You know, you don't want there to be any daylight that separates us, between us and them. You want to arrive at this exquisite mutuality. One of the great privileges of my life was knowing Cesar Chavez as a friend, the great farm worker leader, the starter of a movement, you know. He was probably the best listener I had ever met in my life. If you were talking to Cesar Chavez, you were the only person in the room. You were the only person who existed. He was never looking over your shoulder to see if somebody more important was on the approach. It was only you. But quite famously, one of his, a reporter had commented to him and said, wow, these farm workers, they sure love you. And Cesar just shrugged and smiled and said, the feeling's mutual, which again is the whole hope, that somehow we arrive at this place where there is no distance or daylight that separates us. At Homeboy Industries, I'm not the great healer, and that gang member over there is in need of my exquisite healing. The truth be told, we're all a cry for help. We're all in need of healing. It's one of those things that unites us together as members of the human family. I remember no homie ever found more job opportunities than this guy everybody called Dreamer. I knew him since he was a little mocosito growing up in the housing projects, a little guy, and he grew up. I knew his whole family, and they were in my parish, and I watched him get into a gang, and a very intelligent kid with a dangerous sense of humor that I always enjoyed. But he never really did school. And in his early 20s, he's in his 40s now, but in his early 20s, he was a kind of a yo-yo, in and out of being locked up. I'd find him a job. We didn't find more jobs for any other person but this guy. Private sector in one of our social enterprises. But he'd always kind of gravitate back to vague criminality before too long. Anything, usually something that involved drugs, the sale of or the use of, and then he'd wander back to me asking for a job. And so this went on for some time. And he had finished a 4-month probation violation in county jail, and there he is sitting in front of me in my office. And he says what gang members often say, this time it'll be different. I go, all right. So with him sitting there, I call a friend of mine who runs a vending machine company And he had hired homies in the past. I'm thinking maybe he'll do it again. And sure enough, he says, tell him he can start tomorrow. That's a holy man right there. So Dreamer began work the next day at the vending machine company. Well, 2 weeks later, there he is again in front of my desk. I go, híjole, Madre Santa, here we go all over again. But this time he pulls out of his pocket his very first paycheck, and he waves it proudly, and he says, damn, G, this paycheck makes me feel proper. I mean, my mom, she's proud of me, and my kids, they're not ashamed of me. And you know who I have to thank for this job. And I said, well, gosh, who? And he looks at me strangely, and he says, well, God, of course. I said, oh, yo. No, that's right, yeah. That would be God, yeah. He goes, you thought I was going to say you. I said, no, gosh. God's number one, yeah. He said, you are so lucky we're not living in them Genesis days. I'm sorry, them Genesis days? He goes, yeah, because God would have been had struck down your ass already by now, he said. Well, all I really recall of that conversation was that we just dissolved in laughter. We fell out of our chairs. And I defy you to identify exactly who's the service provider, who's the service recipient. I have no idea. It's mutual. If you'll permit me, I want to kind of take a little higher aerial view. Because why would this even matter? And I'm a priest, I'm a Jesuit, and I think a lot depends on what kind of God you have, you know. It's how it helps you see. You know, a couple weeks ago, the Pope was in the United States, and a lot of people were talking about him, but I was talking about Yogi Berra, you know, because New York Yankees catcher, and I was a catcher when I was a kid on Little League, and I always loved Yogi Berra. Later on, as an adult, I discovered that he was famous for having mangled the English language, you know, and deja vu all over again. And there's a whole list of things. But the homies kind of mangled their language too, and they're famous for it all the time. I wrote about it a little bit in my book. But like, for example, I had a homegirl named Lisa who works for me, and her man came to pick her up after work, and she wanted to introduce him to me, and she brings him in. She goes, "This is my sufficient other." I said, "No doubt." You know, recently I turned the reins over kind of running the place, so I have a CEO who kind of does the day-to-day, which is a nice thing because it's a $15 million annual operation. It's nice to have somebody else run it. And I had a homie came into my office not long ago, and he says, "Damn, gee, my lady, she is in a bad mood today." I said, "Why?" "Well, you know, she's beginning her administration period." I said, "You know, I just ended mine, and kind of know what she's going through." But my favorite one, and here's my point, happened when I was presiding at Mass in a juvenile detention facility in San Fernando Juvenile Hall in Sylmar. And we're in a big gym, and there are 300 kids there, mainly gang members. And, and I'm vested, and I had the little hoja, the sheet that has the readings in it. And sometimes as a presider, I'm going to listen to the readings. I'm going to close my eyes. So I put the sheet on my lap, and I listened to these gang members come up and doing the readings. And some kid, I think it was the Psalm, I was listening with my eyes closed. And he got up with something of an overabundance of confidence. And he said, "The Lord is exhausted." And I go, "What the hell?" And "The Lord is exalted." And I remember thinking at the time, wow, that's way better. I remember thinking, wow, yeah, that's the God I want to know. the one that's exhausted. You know how you would go up to somebody and say, how are you feeling? Oh, I'm so tired, but it's a good tired. You know, why? Well, I helped my friend move into her apartment, or I had the grandkids the whole week. I'm exhausted. I'm pooped. But it's a good tired. Then just the thought of a God who exhausts God's self in being too busy loving us to have any time left to be disappointed. Yeah, I like that God way better than the exalted one, or the one who cares about it being exalted. I know, I think these things matter, because how you see God is how you're going to see folks who are broken and on the margins. And it's the only way that you can have mercy and recognize your wound and their wound. So Homeboy Industries was started a long time ago. I had more hair and no gray. I was pastor of the poorest parish in the city of Los Angeles, Dolores Mission, nestled in the middle of 2 public housing projects, Pico Gardens and Aliso Village. It was the largest grouping of public housing west of the Mississippi. We had 8 gangs in those projects in my parish. There were more outside, but just in my parish were 8, which is unheard of. Usually you'd have 1, and all the enemies would be outside. But we had 8, and they were all at war with each other, making it, according to the LAPD, the place of the highest concentration of gang activity in Los Angeles. So if LA is the gang capital of the world, my parish was the gang capital of Los Angeles, which I didn't know when I drove up. So I buried my first young person killed in 1988, and I buried my 200th young person 2 months ago, killed for no reason at all. Not all of them from that parish, but I run a large gang intervention program, so I get asked to do this. So the first thing we did was we started a school, because there were so many junior high age, middle school age gang members who had been given the boot from their home school. Nobody wanted them, so they were wreaking havoc in the projects. They were violent, they were selling drugs, they were writing on walls. So I remember I walked out to them and I would corner them, isolate them, and I'd say, hey, if I found a school that would take you, would you go? And to my surprise, every single one said yes. And then I couldn't find a school that would take them. So that kind of forced my hand. So across the street from the church is our parochial elementary school, K-8, first 2 floors. Well, the entire 3rd floor was the convent, you know, where the ninjas lived. And so I gathered them all together in the living room, and I said, hey, you know, would you guys mind moving out, and we could turn the convent, like, say, into a school for gang members? And they said, sure. I don't know what we'd do without nuns. And so that's happened. And gang members came in large numbers to the church, not to church services, but to our church complex, which upset the apple cart a little bit, because aren't churches supposed to be hermetically sealed? You know, good people in, bad people out. So that was a good gospel challenge. And then they started saying, if only we had jobs. And so myself and the women in the parish, we marched around the factories that surrounded the housing projects, trying to find felony-friendly employers. And that wasn't so forthcoming. So we invented things, you know, a crew to paint out graffiti, and a landscaping crew, and a light maintenance crew, and a crew to build our child care center. And in 1992, Los Angeles had the civil unrest, and everybody looked to our community to be one of those that would predictably explode, and we didn't. And so when the LA Times asked me, why is that? I said, I think it's because we had 60 strategically hired gang members working. They had a reason to get up in the morning, a reason not to torch their community. They were invested. And so a movie producer named Ray Stark, who happened to have $500 million, summoned me. And long story short, he said, how would you use some of my money? I'd like to use all of it, actually, but That was not on the table. I said, well, why don't you buy this abandoned bakery across the street? It has ovens. We'll put hairnets on rival enemy gang members. They can bake bread, and we'll call it Homeboy Bakery. That's the extent of my business plan that I presented to him. And he said, sure. So we were off and running. A month later, we started Homeboy Tortillas in the Grand Central Market. Once we had plural, we changed our name from Jobs for a Future to Homeboy Industries, as if there was any industry involved in this. Not everything worked. I'll be the first to admit it. Homeboy Plumbing really was not hugely successful. Who knew? People didn't want gang members in their homes. I did not see that coming. And nobody ever intends to do such a thing, but we backed our way now into becoming the largest gang intervention rehab and reentry program on the planet. So 15,000 folks a year walk through our doors, and just about anything that you think might be helpful, we try to do. The centerpiece is our 18-month training program. Every gang member wants to get in that. And we have a lot of curricular offerings, from anger management to parenting to grief and loss. We still have a school, tons of 12-step programs. A case management for all our trainees. Mental health therapy, so we have 5 paid therapists and 43 volunteer therapists and psychiatrists who prescribe medicine when needed. Free tattoo removal. No place on the planet removes more tattoos, gang-related tattoos, than we do, I suppose. We have 3 laser machines in a designated clinic. We have 1 paid physician assistant, but we have 47 volunteer doctors, thousands and thousands of treatments a year. So if any of you are starting to regret that University of Manitoba tattoo you have, see me afterwards. You're not laughing, so I take it you have one of those tattoos, so that's a clear indicator. So it all started because of a guy named Frank who wandered into my office. I'd never met him before, I didn't know him. 2 days out of Corcoran State Prison, and he's sitting in front of my desk, and tattooed on his forehead, filling the entire space like a billboard, and pardon my French, it said, "Fuck the world," filled the whole space. And he said, you know, I am having a hard time finding a job. And I said, well, Frank, maybe we could put our heads together on this one, and I'm thinking, where do I send him, to McDonald's? Do you want fries with that? No, I don't want fries. Mothers clutching their kids running out of the store. So naturally I hired him, and he bagged bread for 2 years. And so I went looking for a doctor, and I found a doctor at White Memorial Hospital who had a laser machine, and he gave me 1 hour a month to chip away at Frank's forehead and a few others. And before long, I had a waiting list of 3,000 gang members who wanted the same service, so we couldn't really stay with that arrangement. Parentheses, Frank is now a security guard at a movie studio in Hollywood, and there is no trace left of the dumbest, angriest thing he had ever done. Proving once and for all, as Sister Helen Prejean says, all of us are a whole lot more than the worst things we've ever done. What else have we? So we have all our training programs, solar panel installation training program that's hugely successful, and we're able to locate incredible jobs after that. We have all our social enterprises, which have grown to 10. I can never get them all, but the bakery, which is thriving, and Homeboy Homegirl merchandise, and Homeboy Silk Screen, which is huge, been around for 21 years. Homeboy Diner, which is the only place you can get food at City Hall in Los Angeles. I'm missing a lot. So Homeboy Grocery, which is the where you buy our chips and salsas in a whole chain of stores in California. Farmers markets, we have a lunch truck. We have 2 venues at LAX, so if you fly to American Airlines ever, Terminal 4, United Airlines Terminal 6. And Homegirl Cafe, where women with records, young ladies from rival gangs, waitresses with attitude will gladly take your order. It's become something of a famous place, you know, at any given time. You know actor Jack Black? Yeah, he was in there a couple weeks ago. Jim Carrey has been there numerous times. Pandemonium whenever he's there. It's selfies all over the place. A couple months ago, with only 2 hours' notice from the Secret Service, we had Vice President Joe Biden wanted to have lunch there. So it was motorcade and entourage, and I was making my 8-day annual silent retreat, so I wasn't there. And so I get a voicemail message, "Hey, Father Boyle, this is Joe Biden." He doesn't even say Vice President. This is Joe Biden, and wow, Homeboy Industries, and kind of like an old shoe. And at one point he says, "You know, I tell everybody who will listen, the only reason I stay a Catholic is because Jesuits and nuns," he said, you know. And I said, "Me too, Joe." But I wasn't there, so I had to get the debrief, and there was a homie named Louie who came up to me and he said, "While you were gone, we were visited by an MVP." I said, "Do you mean a VIP?" That one, VIP, yeah. He goes, "Damn, gee, imagine here at Homeboy Industries, we were visited by the Vice President of the United States, Mick Romney." I swear to you. You couldn't make that up, you know, and so I'm thinking of adding a current affairs class to our curriculum. But most famously, Diane Keaton came once for lunch, and she, movie star, actress, Academy Award winner, Annie Hall, Godfather movies, big movie star. She's there with a regular, a guy who's there once a week, and so her waitress is Glenda, and Glenda's a big girl, been there, done that, tattooed, gang member, felon, parolee. She has no clue who Diane Keaton is, and so she's taking her order, and Diane Keaton says, "What do you recommend?" And Glenda rattles off the 3 platillos that she really likes, and Diane Keaton says, "I'll have that second one. That one sounds good." And then suddenly something dawns on Glenda. She looks at Diane Keaton and she says, "Wait a minute. I feel like I know you from somewhere, you know, like maybe we've met." And Diane Keaton decides to, you know, deflect it humbly. "Oh, gosh, I don't know. I suppose I have one of those faces that people think they've seen before." And then Glenda goes, "No, now I know. We were locked up together." Honest to God, that just took my breath away when I heard it, and I don't believe we've had any further Diane Keaton sightings now that I think of it. But suddenly kinship so quickly, Oscar-winning actress, attitudinal waitress, exactly what God had in mind. And what is on God's mind? And again, if you'll permit me here, you need only go to hear Jesus say to the gathered, "That you may be one." I suppose he could have said more stuff about himself, but he doesn't want it to be about himself. He wants it to be about us. I invite you to take a leisurely stroll through the Acts of the Apostles, and what you will discover beyond a quaint snapshot of life in the earliest Christian community is, in fact, the measure of health in any community at all, including here. Things will leap off the page, things like see how they love one another. That's not a bad measurement. There's nobody needy in this community, equally a great metric. But my favorite one is an odd one, and it says just simply, "And awe came upon everyone." it would seem that the measure of the health of any community at all may well reside in its ability to stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it. All of us are called to be what Alice Miller, the late great child psychologist, called enlightened witnesses, people who through your kindness and tenderness and focused, attentive love return people to themselves. At Homeboy Industries, we go out of our way not to hold the bar up and ask people to measure up. We just want to show up and hold the mirror up and tell people the truth, knowing that my truth is your truth and your truth is a gang member's truth, and it all happens to be the same truth. And here's the truth. You are exactly what God had in mind when God made you. And then you watch folks on the margins as they become that truth, as they inhabit that truth, and no bullet can pierce it. No 4 prison walls can keep it out, and death can't touch it because it's huge. But it is a task at Homeboy Industries always to reach in and dismantle the messages of shame and disgrace that get in the way, that keep people from seeing their truth. We were talking about this at lunch. Marcus Borg, the great, also late, great scripture scholar, used to say that the principal suffering of the poor throughout history and throughout Scripture is shame and disgrace, and I think that's quite right. That's the thing you have to contend with. I remember some years ago I was invited to speak to 600 social workers in Richmond, Virginia, and I wasn't paying that much attention. I always say yes to things, and then only months later what is this thing? And I pulled out the letter, and I figure I'm a keynote, maybe open, close, lunch. I look at it, and it's a one-day conference from 9 to 5. It's a gang in-service. I am to be the only speaker from 9 to 5. So I called 2 homies in, Andre and Jose. I sit them down, and I said, look, you're flying with me to Richmond, Virginia. I'd like you to get up and tell your stories. Take your time, because we got a long-ass day to fill. I had never heard their stories, and so Jose gets up. He's 25 years old and gang member, tattooed, been to prison, of course, and started like anybody does in our 18-month program in what we call the humble place. The first 3 months, their first phase is cleaning toilets. It's kind of a equalizer. You know, somebody comes in, I'm a shot caller in my gang, great, toilets. Everybody does toilets, you know. And it's a great way to start. Well, he worked his way up. He ended up becoming a valued member of our substance abuse team, a man very, very solid in his own recovery, and now he was helping younger guys and women with their addiction issues. A man who had spent a long stretch of time as a homeless man and an even longer stretch as a heroin addict. So he gets up in kind of a self-effacing way to begin his talk, and he said, I guess you could say my mom and me, we didn't get along so good. I think I was 6 when she looked at me and she said, why don't you just kill yourself? You're such a burden to me. Well, 600 social workers audibly gasped. And then he says, it sounds way worser in Spanish, he said to them. And we got whiplash going from gasp to laugh. Then he said, I think I was 9 when my mom drove me down to the deepest part of Baja California, and she walked me up to an orphanage, and she knocked on the door. And when the guy came to the door, she said, I found this kid. And she left me there for 90 days. until my grandmother could get out of her where she had dumped me, and my grandmother rescued me. My mom beat me every single day of my elementary school years with things you could imagine and a lot of things you couldn't. Every day, my back would be bloodied and scarred. In fact, I'd have to wear 3 t-shirts to school every day. The first t-shirt, because the blood would seep through, and the second t-shirt, you could still see it. Finally, the third t-shirt, you couldn't see any blood. Kids at school, they'd make fun of me. Hey, fool, it's 100 degrees. Why are you wearing 3 t-shirts? Then he couldn't speak any longer, so overwhelmed with emotion. And he seemed to be staring at a piece of his story that only he could see. And when he could regain speech, he said through his tears, I wore 3 t-shirts well into my adult years because I was ashamed of my wounds. I didn't want anybody to see them. And now I welcome my wounds. I run my fingers over my scars. My wounds are my friends. After all, how can I help heal the wounded if I don't welcome my own wounds? And awe came over everyone. The measure of our compassion lies not in our service of those on the margins, but only in our willingness to see ourselves in kinship with them. If you don't welcome your own wound, you will tend to despise the wounded. In the state of California, because we don't welcome our own brokenness, we take the broken and we build prisons to house them. Getting the diagnosis right is everything. We were talking about this yesterday with a lot of stakeholders here in Winnipeg. Nobody has ever met a treatment plan worth anything that was born of a bad diagnosis. I don't believe that's ever happened. Years ago, I was diagnosed eventually with leukemia. I'm feeling okay at the moment. I'm here. Or as the homies still say, I hear your cancer's in intermission. I said, yeah, apparently it stepped out to the lobby to buy popcorn. May the line be long. But it's funny seeing giving the blood next door. I used to always give blood. That was kind of a regular feature of my life because myself and my dad, we always had blood that anybody could use. And so I went to give blood, and the guy kind of blanched, and he said, you need to go to your doctor. So I went to my doctor, who I don't ever go to anymore, and he said, oh, you have mono. Well, I think we can all agree there's a difference between mononucleosis and leukemia. And so only a year later did I discover that I had leukemia, and I had to be raced into chemo. So a bad diagnosis is never neutral. It always puts you behind the 8 ball. You have to play catch up. It does damage to not get it right. So you want to get it right. But this kind of thing, urban violence and gang violence, we always get it wrong. We diagnose it so crazily. We always think kids are drawn to gangs. Join a gang, see the world, wine, women, and song. Not true. And you might even say gang members have told us that's the truth, and you believe them? It's easier to say that I joined a gang because I wanted to belong, and they're my second family, and they have my back. It's easier to say that than to say, my mom used to put cigarettes out on me, And she used to hold my head in the toilet and flush till I nearly drowned. That's hard to say. It's easier to say, I joined a gang because I wanted to belong. No kid is seeking anything when he joins a gang. Always fleeing something. I've never met the exception, and I've been doing this a long time. Gangs are the places kids go when they've encountered their life as a misery. Who doesn't know by now that misery loves company? Gang violence is the urban poor's version of teenage suicide. Often enough, it's how they act this out. If a kid can't imagine or conjure up an image of what tomorrow looks like, then his present isn't very compelling. And if his present doesn't compel him, then he won't care whether he inflicts harm, and he won't care whether he ducks to get out of harm's way. It's kind of how it works. You want to get this right. I was telling this yesterday, and I hate to repeat myself, but there I am on the Dr. Phil show, and I know what was I thinking. But we thought we had talked the producers down from doing something stupid, and there I am backstage, and I can hear Dr. Phil say, and now, ladies and gentlemen, the executive director and founder of Homeboy Industries, Father Greg Boyle. And I walk out there, and there are bleachers filled with people, and they're clapping, and to my horror, there's Phil sitting on the stage on a stool. My empty stool is next to him, awaiting me. But on his side of the stage is a gorgeous mahogany coffin on those four-wheel dolly deals. On my side of the stage is a perfectly reconstructed jail cell with bed and toilet and sink and bars. They went to great expense for these two set pieces. So they flew out 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old boys, African-American, Latino, Caucasian, 3 kids who apparently had been gravitating perilously close to gang involvement with their very distraught single mothers. And one by one, they brought the kids out, and they would Phil would sort of grab each one figuratively by the lapel and say, "Don't you see where this choice is leading you to death or prison?" Finally, by the 3rd kid, I had to intervene. It was more than I could take. I said, "Phil, how do I break this to you? These kids know this better than either of us know it. They know it'll end in death or prison. They don't care that it will." And that's the key diagnostic moment. If you know that that's the diagnosis, that'll lead you down the path that'll lead to a treatment plan worthy of this complex social dilemma. Because there's only 3 profiles of kids who join gangs, not 5, not 8, only 3. There's the despondent kid who can't imagine tomorrow. There's the traumatized kid who cannot see his way clear to transform his pain, so he keeps transmitting it. And then there's the mentally ill kid, and they're all on a continuum of severity from this kid's more despondent than mentally ill, this kid is more traumatized than mentally ill. If we knew that to be the case, as I would bet my entire life on it, we would infuse hope to kids for whom hope is foreign. We would help heal the traumatized, and we'd deliver mental health services in a timely and culturally appropriate way. Good. Thank you for clapping periodically, because then I can take a swig of water, and I'm very grateful to you. I'm battling some kind of thing. So let me end with this story, and then we're going to open it up for some questions and hopefully some answers. I'll anticipate a question. One question that always comes up is about enemies working side by side with each other. It's decidedly dicey. A kid will come in and say, "I'm ready, ready, ready," and I'll say, "Okay, I have an opening in the bakery, but you have to work with X, Y, and Z," and I rattle off the names of rivals, enemies. And they always think for a long time, and then they say, "Okay, I'll work with them, I'm not going to talk to them." And I remember how in the early days, how much that bothered me, because it just did, And I kind of got panicked about it until you discover, of course, that it's impossible for human beings to demonize people they know. Humans can't pull that off. Humans can't sustain that. So I had a kid, a little short guy, 19 years old. Everybody called him Youngster. I thought he was ready, so I bring him into our Homeboy Silkscreen factory, which is a huge facility kind of off campus from our headquarters. Thousands and thousands of gang members have worked side by side there over the last 2 decades. So I introduce Youngster to his 30 coworkers, and I watch him as he shakes hands with each one, looks them in the eye, firm handshake, and there were a lot of enemies, a lot of rivals. And I remember thinking, wow, this is great. Until he gets to the last guy, and the last guy seems to be wanting to avoid this encounter altogether, a kid everybody called Puppet. And when Puppet and Youngster are in each other's vicinity, they mumble something, they stare at their shoes, they don't shake hands. Well, I know they're enemies because I know what gangs they're from, but he just finished shaking hands with a whole bunch of enemies. I discover later that this is a hatred that's really quite deep and personal, beyond which neither of them think they can get past. So I sense that much at the moment, and I say, look, if you guys can't hang working together, let me know. I got a bunch of people who want this job. Calladitos, they don't say a word. Well, 6 months later, Puppet leaves his house, walks to a corner store some distance from his home, and he buys something. But on his way home, for some reason, he decides to take a shortcut, so he dodges into an alley, and because he took this detour, suddenly, unexpectedly, he's surrounded by 10 members of a rival gang, 10 against 1, and they beat him badly. And he falls to the ground, and while he's lying there, they will not stop kicking his head until he's lifeless. Somebody finds his body and takes him to White Memorial Hospital, where he's declared effectively brain dead. But it's the policy there to keep you connected to machines for 48 hours so you can get a flat read, with no brain activity. And if it's flat for 2 days, then the doctors can sign the death certificate and make it official. This allowed family and friends to gather. I was giving a talk at St. Louis University. I flew home immediately. I've seen a lot of horrible things in my life, but nothing to compare to the sight of this young man with his head swollen many times its size. It was horrifying. You could barely train your eyes on him. So at the end of the 48-hour period, as a priest, I said a blessing prayer. I gave him la unción de los enfermos. I anointed his forehead with oil. We disconnected. And a week later, we buried him. But in the first 24 hours, as Puppet was lying beaten in the hospital, and I was alone in my office at 8:30 at night, the phone rings, and it's Youngster, Puppet's coworker from the silkscreen factory. Hey, he says, that's messed up. About what happened to Puppet? And I said, yeah, it is. And then with a certain kind of eagerness even, he says, is there anything I could do? Can I give him my blood? We both fell silent under the weight of it, until finally he broke the silence, choking back his tears. And he said with great deliberation, he was not my enemy, he was my friend. We worked together. Now, can I say that always happens at Homeboy Industries? Of course it does. Any exceptions? No. I can't think of a single one. And it shouldn't surprise us that God's own dream come true for us, that we be one, just happens to be our own deepest longing for ourselves. For it turns out it's mutual. And so you find your way out to the margins because you know that if you stand there, look under your feet. The margins are getting erased because you stood there. And then brace yourselves, because people will accuse you of wasting your time. But the prophet Jeremiah writes, in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. And we're called to make those voices heard. For this lecture is not the place you've come to, it's always been the place you will go from. For the vision still has its time, presses on to fulfillment, and it will not disappoint. And if it delays, we wait for it. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. So some of you need to go to class, and some of you don't want to go to class. And anyway, we're going to do question and answer. So, yeah, you're going to say something? Sure. Yeah.
We have two microphones, one on the right and one on the left. So if you just raise your hands, we'll try and bring a microphone around to you as quickly as possible.
Father, could you talk a little bit about racism? Much of the margins in Winnipeg relate to racism, and I wonder if you could speak about racism at home.
I don't think I'm all that good at that. Our program is not for those who need help, it's only for those who want it. So you have to walk through the door. It's like recovery. No amount of me wanting that guy to have a life is the same as that guy wanting to have it. It's just like recovery. In recovery, they say it takes what it takes. Who and why walks through our doors? Why would they walk through? Well, it's the death of a friend, the birth of a son, a long stretch in prison, whatever. So, as I mentioned, those 8 gangs we had were 7 were Latino and 1 was African American. And within no time at all, the African American Crip set moved out of the projects. So the area in which we moved to our second and our third headquarters was in what they called the Hollenbeck Police Precinct. 40 gangs, 10,000 gang members, all Latino. So we kind of had that reputation for a time that we only helped Latino gang members. And the truth is, we help anybody who walks through the doors. If African American gang members don't walk through the doors, there's not much we can do. We can't do quotas. We don't recruit because we know how it works. There isn't a gang member in LA County who doesn't know about Homeboy Industries. By the time we got to our 4th headquarters in 2008, that's when we started to see that we were serving the whole county. Of course, in the California prisons, African American gang members and Latino gang members, it doesn't matter anymore who your enemies are among the Latinos. It's about race. So that's an added complication at Homeboy. We have men, women, African American, Latino, Asian. We even have white supremacists, which is kind of an interesting mix. They come out of prison, they have swastikas all over the place. And if they're willing to change their lives, why wouldn't we be willing to help them do it? So we try to model what it is for people to not demonize. And the truth is, you can't demonize people you know. So there are a lot of systemic, structural things in your question, and I don't know how to address it except that in the end, kinship will win the day. Now that may seem kind of lofty, but kinship is about just being persevering in the notion that we have to stand against forgetting that we belong to each other. Recognizing that, for example, in California prisons, they're just filled with poor men of color. So all the while you're trying to announce that as an injustice. You're trying to show a light on that reality. But the truth is, at Homeboy, we're trying to work with people one person at a time. Knowing that if you stand at the margins, people start to question the margins. If you stand at the margins, people start to say, why are you standing there? And I think that's important because people will ask you why you're standing there. So it's less about having a program, how do we address racism? I think you chip away at stuff, and it is the slow work of God to acknowledge that we belong to each other. And that widening the circle so that nobody is outside of it is a kind of a daily, constant lucha, struggle. And you have to engage in it. And I don't have any kind of magic wand how to address racism. I think there's so many complex things, especially in the United States in terms of policing, that I think they really do believe that their task is to get the bad guy, and the bad guy doesn't belong to them, and the bad guy to them is often a poor man of color. So that's a cultural shift in how you do policing, and we've made progress, but boy, do we have a long way to go.
Doesn't the United States itself as a country with its racial segregation, that is mirrored in the prison populations in the United States? Because what you find in terms of empirical evidence about group behavior in prisons, in particular US prisons, is that they're highly racialized. So you as some homeboy, how do you actually take on that task of de-racializing these guys who come in with very fixed notions of race, very ignorant, I guess very brainwashed, and with high levels of violent tendencies to hate the other? How do you de-racialize Latinos compared to African American, compared to white, compared to Asian? How do you do that at home? And I guess you've been successful. I've never heard about it, but clearly it's been a successful industry. So how do you do that in the United States where people are heavily racialized?
I don't think we never deal with things head on, you know? We never say, let's talk about, we know that you guys are enemies, you're from rival gangs, so we're gonna sit you down. We never do that. We know that you're African American, you're Latino, in prison you guys don't get along. We're going to kind of deal with that. We don't. I was saying earlier that Richard Rohr, the theologian, says that women work things out face to face, men work things out shoulder to shoulder. By and large, we work things out shoulder to shoulder. We don't articulate it. It's utterly reliable. It will always work out. Again, there is absolutely no exception to this. Where at the time, after they finish their time here, that they hang on to this racial disparity. It doesn't happen. And it just tells us something about human nature. Put people together. And then pretty soon people go, by osmosis, they discover, wow, we're actually similar, we're not dissimilar. My God, we have the same issues. My God, we've been traumatized by the same things. We share a torturous childhood. We hold that in common. That stuff happens very, very fast without anybody sitting down. Let's talk about the racial divide that we've experienced. Never happens at Homeboy. And I'm really glad it doesn't because it's more organic, it's more natural, and it's utterly reliable. Utterly. In fact, you'll find folks being in photographs together, and sometimes they'll comment on it, and then they'll have their arm around you and said, "We'd never do this in prison." They always say stuff like that. And again, you don't want to force stuff. People come at their own time. I heard a homie the other day describe Homeboy Industries. He goes, "You know, here we laugh from the stomach." I'd never heard that before. And I thought, yeah, I get what that is. It's genuine, it's deep, it's profound, it's universal, we all share it. Yeah, here we laugh from the stomach. I asked a homie the other day, a little guy, a minor, who came from school, and he was just sitting in my office. He deposited his backpack for safekeeping. They all do that in my office. They know that no one will enter my office to steal their backpack, which is true. And so he's just sitting there, and I'm writing something. I said, "Hang on a second." And I said, small talk, you know, "How'd you get here today?" "Oh, I walked." "Oh, okay." And then he says, "Actually, I came running." And I looked at him, and we both sort of connected. I said, "Yeah, that's right. You came running. I get it." Because it's a place that's spacious and generous and accepting and boundless in its love. If love is the answer, community is the context, tenderness is the methodology, and tenderness is the most foreign thing that a gang member has ever experienced, and it's liberating. Everybody finds transformation. I do not transform that kid, but we both find transformation in that place. And there's a difference there. A PBS reporter finished an interview by saying, "How's it feel to have saved thousands and thousands of lives?" And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. All I know is my life has been changed by the people here in this place. In fact, every day I come running. Yes.
I'm wondering if you can reconcile for me, if you will, the central image of kinship that you keep on coming back to with people who would speak of language of professionalism and appropriate boundaries and care for the caregiver.
That's right.
And a like question is whether there is a union and whether you could imagine your industry being the same with a union.
Say it again. Say that second part.
Is there a union?
Oh, a union?
Yeah. Is your industry, is Homeboy Industries unionized?
No, I'll answer that first part, you know. Because we're a training program and we're a therapeutic community, it kind of is a language that we wouldn't necessarily understand. We want them to move on after 18 months. It's hard for them because they don't want to, you know, because it's kind of a cocoon, it's a nest, it's a comfort zone. We want them to always feel that way. You know, homies will come back, you know, it's a touchstone of tenderness where they can come and, you know, a kid came in the other day, he used to work for us years and years ago, or was in our training program. I said, "What are you doing?" "Well, it's my day off. I came to get my fix." And I said, "Fix of what?" He goes, "Love," you know. And I get it, you know, I know exactly what that is, you know. I think the question about boundaries is really a good one. I mean, we're so terrified, you know, terrified. And in the end, tell me how we can do this without it being relational. I don't know how. And we think it can happen without entering into relationship, without being connected to each other. And I don't know how, because then we have this idea that if we just deliver services fast enough, and here are the list of services, and often enough it's the outsider view designing the list of services without really listening to people. And you know, the people who I want to work at Homeboy Industries are the ones who stop in my office at the end of the day and they say, "I don't know where I would be without this place. This place saved my life today. Senior staff will say that all the time. And I go, yes, that's the person I want to have work here. Because otherwise you have people who are there to fix bad people, you know, or fix the broken people. And I don't want those people working at Homeboy, you know. The people who can say, I am the healer, instead of, I need healing. I want the person who says, I need healing. Because in the end, they have a greater capacity to receive people because they're connected. Their brokenness connects to the woundedness of those who walk through our doors. I get the boundary thing, but I don't know how else you do this unless it's utterly, totally relational, where you are connected to people. If it's dispassionate delivery of services, well, then you're the Department of Motor Vehicles, you know, and I'm not that interested in that. Call me old-fashioned, yeah.
This will be our last question.
Oh, really?
It's not a question. Thank you so much, Father Greg. At our church, one of our ministers and colleagues, Dr. Carl Ridd, taught us to say in the Lord's Prayer, the kingdom of God rather than the kingdom of God. And I really appreciated you're making me really understand that today, the kingdom of heaven. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Do you have one more over there?
Yeah, it's a nuts and bolts kind of a question. Do you have difficulty finding enough employers to work with after your homies are done? You know, they're 18 months. And do you support those employers, let's say, as much as you support the homies?
Yeah, it's a tough thing, you know. It's hard to find employers willing to give them a chance. We've been around for 27 years, so we've been able to nurture a lot of employers to be able to, you know, to help them. A lot of times, you know, they're nervous, and again, you can't demonize people you know, and they'll go, okay, send me somebody, and they're quite terrified of that prospect. And then you send them somebody, and they go, wow, this guy's great, he's interesting, he's funny, he's on time, and can you send us somebody else like him as well? You know, so that happens, but it's just because we have this notion that keeps us from, yeah. I don't want to end on it. Go ahead, shout it out, and this will be the last one, and I'll end with something.
I'm just wondering, in terms of if you could identify general risk factors for kids and young adults slipping back. Like, what I'm wondering is, you know, my understanding of gangs is that they provide a sense of false family to the gang member family. They provide excitement. If you're selling drugs and you're doing well, you may be making a lot of money. So I can see how your organization would successfully substitute the relationships, but how do you counteract that need for excitement, that need for more money?
I think it's all myth. The three things you said are all myth, it seems to me. And we perpetuate myths. We like myths. How are you going to keep them down on the farm after they've made money hand over fist selling drugs? It's like a second family. It's protection, excitement. Law enforcement always says excitement. When they go out and talk about gangs, they always say, it's excitement. I go, are you kidding me? That's the biggest myth, as if somebody's going, wow, yes, I'm going to join that group because it looks exciting. No kid joins a gang because he wants to belong. He joins a gang because he would like very much to die. And then you go, well, no, wait a minute. I've talked to gang members, and they've told me excitement. I go, yeah, I know they have. No, not even a slice of it is true. And that's really important because you want to get underneath it. You want to say, wow, what is this about? And again, there's no substitute for having a reason to get up in the morning and a reason not to gangbang at night and a reason for your mom to be proud of you and a reason for your kids not to be ashamed of you. That beats any amount of money you make as a drug dealer. Always, always. There's no exception. You go, well, wait a minute. There are guys making money selling drugs. Trust me. 95% of all gang members want what every single guy in our office and woman has, which is purpose. And it's like recovery. You know, it's hard for people. It's hard for people to walk in the door. But they all want it because they're human beings. What? Yeah, because I think in the end, you know, it's important to debunk what we've come to believe. And most of it is mythic. And once you get underneath it, you go, wow, this kid is fleeing something. Let's address what they're fleeing. And every kid who comes into our office comes with a disorganized attachment. Mom is frightening or frightened, and you can't calm yourself down if you've never been soothed. And that's how that works. And so we engage in attachment repair that happens in a community that's real, that sheds light on their fake, false, shallow, empty gang past. But the only way you can't shake your finger at it. You have to help them put their finger on it. And then in the light of real community, they can see what that was, which is really the hard work, where they have to re-identify who they are in the world. I used to be that. That was the old version of me. And now I'm this, exactly what God had in mind when God made me. Paradise. Thank you.
We would now call upon Ms. Danielle Felicia, who's a PhD candidate in the Mauro Peace and Studies program, to deliver a note of appreciation.
Over the past couple of days, I've had the honor of hearing Father Boyle in various settings, in community settings and in luncheons, and had conversations with him, and I've noticed a few words come up frequently, and you all have heard them today, and they're tenderness, kinship, compassion, and healing. And I think more than anything, Father Boyle embodies these words, and it's so refreshing to meet somebody who walks what they talk, and he's brought such humility, wisdom, and kindness to our community. And I'm truly grateful to have you here. And it's my profound honor to present you with this token of our appreciation.
I have the feeling I'm going to know you forever. I don't know if you have the same feeling. Here we go. She's taking a picture. Oh, do you got it?
All right.